Hey everybody, it's Micah again, bringing you the recap of the Bozja Incident questline. Or for those of you who don't remember, because it's been a really long time, the Resistance Weapons questline, which came out in 5.2 all the way back in February already. So yeah, it's been quite a long time, and if you're a lore person, like myself, you may want a little bit of a refresher, which is why we're here. And I have to give a shout out to one of my friends who recorded this footage for me. I of course had done this long before I started doing the recaps, and I had no way to get the footage, so thank you very much appreciate this. Anyway, there's a lot to cover, so I'm just gonna jump right on into it. While visiting Kugane, you meet up with Caton, who tells you that Hancock needs to meet with you regarding a very important matter, so you rush off to meet Hancock. Hancock then informs you that Lord Hien sent a request for aid in helping the Bozjan resistance. Bozja being a small nation in southern Ilsabard, who is one of the first to fall to the Empire and is now taking advantage of the chaos in Garlemald to free themselves. Hancock then tells you to go meet with Hien for more details. You find Hien and Ugiri on the shores overlooking Doma Castle. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Hien introduces you to Marsak, a member of the Resistance. Marsak explains that they are trying to reclaim their homeland with the help of Hien and the Eorzean Alliance. The Empire, who was using Dalmasca as their headquarters, were relocating to Bozja, and 3 battalions were already en route. They had at first gone to the Dalmascan Resistance for aid, but the infighting within the Dalmascan Resistance was just way too much. So instead, Hien took it upon himself to muster the forces of Bozja, to give them a symbol of hope. And since there was no figurehead to look up to, instead they decided to look to Gunhilder's blades, the elite guard of Queen Gunhilder of the Third Astral Era, who wielded weapons blessed by the gods. And as the weapons were eventually lost, they wanted to forge new ones as a symbol of hope and of courage. Hien, of course being busy with his own duties in the Doman Resistance, asks us to take his place as an ambassador for the East in Bozja. So now it's time to head to the Doman Enclave and board a ship headed for the Gangos. Here we meet Bozja, I think is how you pronounce it, the leader of the Bozjan Resistance, who is both surprised and relieved to see the great liberator of Doma and El Amigo themselves. You also meet an old friend, Geralt, the best damn blacksmith in the land. Turns out that Rowena had been doing business with the Resistance and sent Geralt to the Gangos to work off some of his debt to her. You also meet Masija, and side note, I am pronouncing all these names phonetically. I have no idea how they are actually pronounced. I'm not sure if they're actual names in some culture or if they're just, something that is a creation of Square Enix. So without voice acting, this is what happens, you make up your own pronunciations. Anyway, Masija explains the plans for reforging the weapons of Gunhilder's blades a little bit more clearly. Apparently the weapons and most of the texts surrounding the history of Gunhilder were lost in the 4th Umbral Calamity, which was the calamity of Earth that brought about the fall of the Elegant Empire and also joined the 3rd shard to the Source. But I digress. Geralt goes on to say that they figured out the types of weapons, the shape of the weapons, and the materials used in the weapons, but they have no idea what imbued them with such power. Apparently Queen Gunhilder had etched each weapon with a holy inscription, which granted that weapon with the power of the gods, but it's the records of those inscriptions that were lost. There were replicas of the blades that could have possibly also had replicas of the inscriptions, but they had been lost in the fall of the Bozjan Citadel during the Bozja Incident. But what was the Bozja Incident, you ask? Well, Marsak explains. 15 years ago, the Garleans were doing experiments with various means of controlling Delamod. One of these included the construction of a lunar transmitter to harness its power. However, when the Garleans activated the transmitter, Delamod responded by blasting the area with raw energy, causing unimaginable damage to Bozja, including the complete destruction of the Citadel. But the Resistance believes they still may be able to find the replicas, and with them, the lost inscriptions of Gunhilder. But to do this, they needed an Aetherologist, and the Alliance sent them Makoto, a student of Beldacian who you may also remember from the Ivalice storyline. The reason an aetherologist was needed was due to the use of a very uniquely aspected crystal, a crystal used by the Bozjan holy men. They used these crystals to cure ailments of the mind by allowing the holy men to remove or even change memories that they deemed too harmful. Once only considered a myth, these same crystals had been found by archaeologists while excavating the area. Makoto's research had determined the crystals to be artificial and resonate on NRR-type vibrations, which were similar to the oscillatory activity of the brain, which is a real thing if you're curious and you want to look it up. I did, but it's just too complicated to sum up here quick. Makoto does give us a simplified Final Fantasy XIV version of this though, by telling us that everybody is made up of corporeal ether, which is our flesh, incorporeal ether, which is our soul, and ethereal residue that makes up our memories. And even if you're a zombie or a ghost or beings made of corporeal or incorporeal ether respectively, you will still retain some of that ether that makes up memory. She then explains that we have two different kinds of memory: explicit and implicit. Now, explicit memories are the ones we can actively recall, like someone's name. And implicit memories are the kind of things that are stored in what is basically our subconscious. They also include things like smells and temperature, sounds, all that sort of thing. She also believes that the crystals work in a similar fashion as the echo, and the seers who use them were people who were blessed with the echo. Therefore, we are the perfect person to run a test using the crystals. And who else could be a better guinea pig than Geralt, who hesitantly agrees? I mean, you gotta pay back Rowena any way you can sometimes. And so we tap into the crystals supplied to us by Makoto and delve into the mind of Geralt, where we get to see this memory of him and Rowena having a conversation about why he was sent to Bozja. And then the memory kind of goes off the rails. Apparently, just like in real life, if something happens that's a little bit too painful, our minds will cover it up with a more pleasant fantasy, and these fantasies can also be seen through the crystal. Our perceptions can also distort things, like it's basically the rose-colored glasses effect, which will also work in reverse and give a bleaker memory of something we experienced. Geralt's memory of this meeting, however, was the kind that was completely covered up by something fantastic. And this part was extremely cute if you're familiar with Geralt and his relationship with Rowena, because his memory turns into him and Rowena laughing and splashing in the ocean on their wedding day. They were just so extremely happy and so deeply in love. When you come out of this memory, Geralt has kind of this look of realization on his face, and he excuses himself, which begs the question: is it possible that he didn't realize he was in love with Rowena? I mean, they do have this past, but maybe he just didn't realize how deep his feelings went? Regardless, I want to see more of this. We need a Geralt-Rowena love story. Do you hear me, Square Enix? We need this. Anyway, to use the crystals to find the inscriptions placed on their replicas, we have to find a willing participant, one who was in the Citadel around the time of the Bozjan incident and could have seen them. The narrative timing being what it is, of course, Makoto has a vision of Cid laying on the cot, a vision you share with her as you're still partially linked by the crystal. You tell Paj Saljan what you saw, and he is surprised that the son of Midas, the man who brought such devastation to Bozja, could very well be its only hope. And lacking any other course of action, you're asked to bring Cid to the Gangos. This takes you to Rhalgr's Reach to find Cid, and here you're greeted by what I like to call the hipster bunny Lilja, who starts immediately talking smack about Cid before being caught by Jesse. I guess good help is hard to find even in Eorzea. Jesse turns away to contact Cid, who's overseeing a project at Suryu's wall, and while you wait, Hipster Bunny starts going on about how much of a fan she is of ours and how she wants to shake our hand, before being sent away by Jesse when she returns. Unfortunately, I don't think this is the last we're gonna hear from Hipster Bun Bun. Jesse tells us that Cid is going to meet us at the Doman Enclave and asks us to be a little gentle with him, since even though the Bozja incident was technically an accident, Cid blames himself for not stopping it. And there's a lot of painful memories there, so we should really tread a little lightly so we don't dig anything really bad up. Foreshadowing. At the Doman Enclave, Cid meets you and you chat for a bit. He explains that he is redirecting part of the ironworks to help with the Doman reconstruction, as he feels a little responsible due to some of his tech being used against the Domans in the war. He then tells us that he also feels responsible for the Bozjan incident, because it was up to him to try to convince his father to end the Meteor project, but he didn't. But he hopes his actions now will be enough to atone for past mistakes. And with that, we're off to the Gangos. Upon arriving, we waste no time and we get Sid on that cot and start prying into his mind almost immediately. And when we enter his memories, things are a little warped. Makoto suspects that it's because there's something going on in his subconscious that's causing the distortion. But regardless, Sid tells us that we need to find the transmission tower, as anything important would be found there. As you run through Sid's fragmented memories, things start to piece themselves together, including the conflicts that happened that day. The Bozjan resistance had infiltrated the Citadel to put an end to the Academy's research, and the guards were on high alert. There's also open battles in the streets. You witness one of these battles and you attempt to see if you can change or influence the outcome, but the memory just resets itself. Not much farther down the road, you're assaulted by antibodies, which seek to purge you out of Sid's mind in an apparent attempt to keep hidden whatever he has buried there. These were pretty easy to defeat. Makoto suspects that the reason we were able to defeat them at all is because they're not part of an actual memory. Sid's subconscious then tries to stop us by manifesting Bahamut himself, who renders Sid immobile. After making short work of this altered Bahamut, Sid is able to recover and we enter the transmission tower. Here we see an exchange between Sid and his father Midas. Memory Sid is trying to get his father to look over some data, but he refuses. Real Sid said he finds this really odd. His father never overlooked data, but he did that day. And when Memory Sid runs away, he leaves behind the data he was trying to get Midas to look at. So you decide to check it out. And it says that the energy of Delamod was far stronger than the transmission tower was designed to withstand. When you enter the heart of the transmission tower, you find the replicas of Gunhilder's blades, or at least one. If you look at them when they come close up, there's only one weapon, a sword, and the other containment units hold what looks like random pieces of elegant technology. Sid then recalls another memory, where he was having an argument with Solus Zogalvis, but Sid finds this odd since Solus could not have been present that day, causing the image of Solus to change to an image of Varus. Varus pulls a gun and shoots. The bullet flies past Memory Sid and strikes Real Sid in the stomach. As Sid convulses on the floor, Makoto urges him to remember that this is only a memory, and at that time, Memory Sid and Real Sid switch places. After some minor taunting, the memory of Varus gets ready to attack as Sid just completely loses control. So you focus your memory and you bring the shades of the Scions to your aid. After the battle, Sid is able to regain a little bit of control. He claims Varus could just not have been there either, as the Academy had full control of the Meteor project. Makoto claims it's merely his mind trying desperately to keep him from remembering something. But what could that be? The memory resets and Sid approaches the image of Varus, and that image slowly morphs into one of his father. It was Midas who had shot Sid that day. Makoto then notices Midas's eyes. They were glowing with a blue light. He'd been tempered by Bahamut. Bahamut was so strong he was able to enthrall beings even from within the confines of Delamod. Therefore, if Bahamut was in control of Midas at the time of the accident, the destruction of Bozja was not an accident at all. And with that, you leave Sid's memory. When you get back, Geralta is pretty excited. With the inscriptions in hand, he'll be able to recreate the weapons. The Bozjans are also surprisingly receptive to the truth, and even ask Sid to forgive them in the way they thought of him, asking him to instead be their ally in their fight for freedom. Sid agrees and takes responsibility for his part as well. Later on, Makoto explains that the crystal we were using had been pretty much depleted, but she's confident that she can recharge it given some time. Sid then makes a surprising suggestion. He suggests that we figure out how to use the crystals on unwilling subjects. This is somewhat out of character for him, in my opinion, as forcing yourselves into someone's mind would be nothing less than an act of torture. etheric waterboarding for the lack of a better equivalency. Before he's able to leave, Makoto does a little flirting, which Sid either flat out ignores or just completely misses. But then again, he does have Nero waiting at home for him, am I right? Next you go speak to Marsak, who tells you the work on the weapons is already began and to seek out Geralt to keep appraised of their progress while him and the others prepare for battle. The scene then switches to Dalmasca, where Galbranth is informed that the spies have reported efforts to reforge Gunhilder's blades being underway. Galbranth just dismisses them as mere trinkets, and that will be little help against the Lady of Blades, who will soon be put into play. He then says that the Empire is fated to fall, but in its place a new nation will rise, and that nation will be greater than the Empire even dared dream of being. And that will be made possible by a power they abhor, aka a primal. Most likely this mysterious Lady of Blades, which my guess would be Merilith or Carrie depending on which version of Final Fantasy I you played. Is this a clue that the elemental fiends are going to be the big bads of this piece of content? I kinda hope so, but again, I digress. Again. You approach Geralt, and he suspects the markings on the blades were more for show than anything. He'll be able to copy them fine, but he does need a fine powder that will be able to conduct ethereal energy. And who do you think has something like that in stock? Rowena, of course, who's in Kugane on business. So you head to Kugane, where Rowena meets you outside of the tea house, and says Geralt had already been in contact with her and explained the situation. Rowena then gives you enough for a single weapon and says to pass it along that she has more, but it will come with a cost next time. When you arrive back in the Gangos, your first weapon is ready and waiting for the Thavnarian scale powder that Rowena gave you. Geralt applies it and you're given your first resistance weapon. And that is the story so far. I will keep you up to date with more, of course, and I will be sure to do a few videos on the new content that's coming up surrounding this storyline as well. I'm really looking forward to have more to do in this game again, so I will be playing it quite a bit. Anyway, if this video was helpful, I hope you drop me a like and subscribe for more. You can also follow me on Twitter, which I have linked below. And as per the usual, it's been a hoot until next time, have fun.